Part 26.12, Surah Ash-Shu'ara, the poets Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Sufi Essence with Hammad Syed. Kanzul Iman, Grana, Ash-Shu'ara, the poets, chapter 26, verse 55. And surely they are enraged at us. Having dismissed the escaping multitude, the children of Israel as a mere small band, verse 54. Pharaoh and his immediate leadership continue their fervent, necessary propaganda campaign to fuel and mobilize the vast Egyptian military forces. This verse records their assessment of the psychological state of the children of Israel, a statement strategically manufactured and presented to rally their own troops and the supporting populace. Surely they are enraged at us. This framing serves two critical, interconnected psychological purposes for the Egyptians. Firstly, it attempts to provide a false, yet compelling justification for the massive, brutal pursuit. By labeling the children of Israel as enraged LGHIN, the Pharaoh strategists instantaneously elevate the fleeing former slaves from helpless victims seeking fundamental freedom to a hostile, aggressive, and politically motivated enemy, seeking profound revenge. This narrative is intended to fundamentally shift the moral and legal calculus, strategically portraying the military action not as a violent, unjust act of re-enslavement, but as a necessary, preemptive national defense against an emotionally charged internal threat. Secondly, this declaration is a manipulation designed to instill both fear and a sense of urgent duty in the Egyptian soldiers, subtly implying that the small band poses a disproportionately dangerous, emotionally volatile threat that demands immediate, swift annihilation. The profound spiritual and physical reality, of course, is that the children of Israel were primarily motivated not by political rage, but by paralyzing fear and the absolute imperative divine command to seek freedom. This deliberate, calculated distortion of the enemy's true motive is a classic, timeless tactic of a tyrannical state, seeking to replace an inconvenient, luminous spiritual truth with a politically useful, psychologically potent lie. The essential spiritual insight for the sincere seeker of Ilm is to recognize that worldly power, when truly threatened by undeniable truth, consistently resorts to projecting its own inner turmoil and profound spiritual sickness onto the righteous. Pharaoh, who is himself utterly consumed by rage, verse 49, at the spiritual defeat and the monumental loss of his entire labor infrastructure, projects this very defining emotion onto the innocent, fleeing people. The true fury and spiritual sickness lies entirely with the oppressor, yet he strategically assigns it to the oppressed. This act of projection ultimately confirms that the true driving force behind the murderous pursuit is the wounded ego, the defeated nafs, and the unbearable loss of political control, rather than any genuine concern for national security or justice. Kanzul Iman, Quran, Ash-Shu'ara, the poets. Chapter 26, verse 56. And surely we are a vigilant group. Immediately following the essential psychological framing of the enemy as enraged, Pharaoh's leadership proceeds to dramatically boost the morale and confidence of their own forces with a powerful, self-congratulatory affirmation of their inherent military capability and total readiness. And surely we are a vigilant group. The powerful term vigilant DHRN implies a state of being fully prepared, constantly alert, heavily armed, strategically cautious, and entirely resistant to any unexpected threat or deception. That statement functions as a public claim of absolute military professionalism, overwhelming superiority, and flawless strategic deployment. The message disseminated to the entire Egyptian army, and the public is meticulously crafted to reassure them that their security and military dominance remain completely intact and utterly unquestionable, despite the severe humiliation of the recent magical duel and the unexpected escape. They are not to be perceived as a disorganized, panicked force. They are explicitly presented as a vigilant group, ready to crush the small band with meticulous precision, overwhelming force, and strategic excellence. This self-assured statement sets the ultimate dramatic stage for the coming, inevitable divine intervention. Pharaoh is not merely relying on the sheer vastness of his numbers. He is arrogantly asserting that his army represents the very epitome of military excellence and strategic readiness. the absolute best that worldly power, skill, and technology can possibly muster. The profound spiritual lesson here is that worldly might, symbolized by this self-proclaimed vigilant group, always attempts to claim an impossible invincibility, yet its true strength is inherently conditional, finite, and entirely dependent on brittle material means. True vigilance, the Sufi knows, lies solely in the heart's constant, uninterrupted awareness muraqabah of Allah's presence, not in the mere readiness of military arms or the boasts of a general. The spiritual contrast is now absolute and complete, the small band under the immediate, sovereign divine protection of the Lord of the creation versus the vigilant group under the command of a defeated, enraged human ego. This supremely confident assertion of military vigilance is the last piece of human arrogance and earthly pride before the transcendent, shattering power of Allah utterly breaks it. Kanzul Iman, Quran, Ash-Shu'ara, the Poets. Chapter 26, verse 57. So we brought them out of the gardens and springs. This is a profoundly pivotal moment in the entire narrative, marking the beginning of Pharaoh's spectacular, catastrophic downfall. The narrative abruptly shifts its focus from the frantic military maneuvers and the empty propaganda to the direct, decisive, consequential action of Allah himself. So we brought them out of the gardens and springs. The very first part of the judgment delivered upon the oppressor is the forceful, sovereign removal of Pharaoh and his people from the very source of their wealth, their power, and their sensual indulgence. The land of Egypt was famously lush, fertile, and immensely wealthy, constantly sustained by the life-giving Nile depicted here poetically and symbolically as gardens and springs. This imagery powerfully symbolizes the immense, taken bounty, the absolute security, and the comfortable, effortless life that Pharaoh and his elite had immorally monopolized by the complete enslavement of the children of Israel. The key to understanding this verse lies in the phrasing "we brought them out," which emphatically stresses that this expulsion was not a choice willingly made by Pharaoh. It was a divine, orchestrated act of expulsion and judgment. They are, in a sense, being lured to their own doom by their unchecked rage and self-destructive overconfidence, moving intentionally away from the security and familiar resourcefulness of their rich home, territory, and onto the predetermined path of their destruction. The furious pursuit which Pharaoh foolishly views as a glorious military endeavor is revealed by the Quran to be a divinely orchestrated movement toward ultimate, inevitable judgment. The essential spiritual meaning is that deep, worldly attachment is often the very trap that leads the soul to ultimate ruin. Pharaoh's tyrannical love for his wealth and his power is the precise reason he feels compelled to pursue the fugitives. This destructive attachment is the hook that drags him and his entire vigilant group into the barren desert and toward the terrifying sea, away from the life-sustaining gardens and springs and their familiar source of physical strength. The Sufi understands this powerful metaphor as a crucial warning. The life of sensual comfort, extreme materialism, and intense attachment, if it leads to oppression and denial of the Creator, is fundamentally fragile and spiritually insecure, and Allah can forcibly strip it away at any moment, turning the very sources of worldly power into the final, inescapable path to doom. Fulfilling the destiny determined by the names ArRahman and ArRaheem, Iman, Quran, Ash-Shu'ara, the Poets, chapter 26, verse 58. And treasures and excellent dwellings. The theme of the divine expulsion and forfeiture continues, detailing the vast, unimaginable extent of the worldly possessions, prestige, and comforts that Pharaoh and his people were compelled to abandon in their frenzied, immediate pursuit. Treasures and excellent dwellings. The powerful reference to treasures Kunz indicates the immense accumulated and often unjustly plundered wealth and astonishing opulence of the Egyptian empire, all built directly upon the slave labor of the children of Israel. The excellent dwellings Mukminkarm speak volumes of the luxurious palaces, the monumental, imposing architecture, and the high, unearned social status that comprehensively defined the privileged life of Pharaoh's elite. This detailed description reinforces the absolute magnitude of the loss and the comprehensive extent of the sacrifice that the Egyptians unknowingly made for the sake of their tyrant's utterly defeated pride. Pharaoh's catastrophic decision to leave this entire spectacular life behind, merely to chase a small band, profoundly underscores the utter irrationality and self-destruction that divine judgment can effortlessly impose upon the arrogant. The judgment is structured with perfect justice. The very act of seeking to preserve his political power forces him to abandon the material wealth that defined that power. He gains nothing and spectacularly loses everything. E.N.E. This verse stands as a powerful, eternal reminder of the ultimate, ephemeral, and fleeting nature of material possessions and worldly status. No matter how excellent one's dwellings or how vast one's accumulated treasures, they are entirely transient and can be instantly forfeited by the Creator's irresistible command. The contrast is spiritually paramount. The children of Israel left voluntarily by divine command, seeking freedom and the Lord of the creation. Pharaoh and his people left by their own spiritual rage and blinded pride, abandoning all their worldly security and luxury. The elam conveyed here is that the desperate pursuit of dunya, the material world, ultimately leads to the tragic forfeiture of both dunya and the ikhira hereafter, whereas the sincere, trusting pursuit of Allah guarantees both. Kanzul, Iman, Quran, Ash-Shu'ara, the Poets, chapter 26, verse 59. Thus it happened. We made the children of Israel their inheritors. The narrative now pauses dramatically for a moment of profound, conclusive spiritual reflection, formally declaring the final, absolute, and inevitable conclusion of this entire sequence of events. Thus it happened. And we made the children of Israel their inheritors. The phrase, thus it happened, functions as a definitive, conclusive statement, firmly affirming the absolute certainty and the perfect divine orchestration of the entire complex process, from the first miracle to the final expulsion. It signals the complete fulfillment of ancient prophecy and the ultimate righteous execution of Allah's eternal decree of justice. The most astonishing and monumental declaration follows, and we made the children of Israel their inheritors. The very people who had been violently enslaved, forced to labor in the dirt, and denied any status or property whatsoever, are now formally designated by Allah as the rightful, legal, and spiritual inheritors of the vast wealth, the gardens and springs, the treasures, and the excellent dwellings of the now defeated oppressors. This is the absolute ultimate act of divine justice Adel, a total comprehensive reversal of fortune and status. Representing a monumental historical and spiritual paradigm shift, the one who oppresses, denies, and disbelieves loses everything. The one who is oppressed and remains patient and steadfast in faith gains everything, both freedom and wealth. The children of Israel did not need to fight a single battle for this inheritance. It was bestowed upon them directly as a consequence of Pharaoh's spectacular impiety and their own collective steadfast endurance and obedience to Prophet Musa, peace be upon him. The core spiritual lesson is fundamental and eternally applicable. The final, glorious result of patiently enduring oppression and maintaining faith for the sake of Allah is not merely salvation, but the rightful, divinely mandated inheritance of the spiritual and often the worldly power and prestige of the defeated oppressors. This principle extends far beyond the literal, historical event to the inner, spiritual realm. Those who endure the hardship of the lower nafs and follow the path of sincere tawhid will ultimately inherit the boundless spiritual treasures of the world. Kanzul, Iman, Quran, Ash-Shu'ara, the Poets, chapter 26, verse 60. So they pursued them at sunrise. The narrative now shifts back to the immediate, tense physical world, precisely detailing the military execution of the Egyptian pursuit. So they pursued them at sunrise. The conjunctive word so fa implies the rapid, immediate consequence of the mobilization ordered by Pharaoh. The massive, self-proclaimed vigilant group set off with ruthless purpose and precision. The specific time at sunrise Mushridan is deeply critical and symbolically relevant. The children of Israel were commanded to leave by night, verse 52, granting them a few precious hours of darkness for their escape. The pursuit commencing precisely at sunrise means the children of Israel are now in open, visible territory, their flight exposed to the full view of the Egyptian army. The timing is deliberate and deeply symbolic. The very moment the light of day breaks, the forces of the tyrant, blinded by their own earthly glory, begin their chase, foolishly believing that the light of the sun exposes their quarry and ensures their easy victory. This is the climactic moment when the full military might of the empire is deployed, and the tension for the children of Israel, who must be nearing the absolute limit of their flight at the Red Sea, reaches its critical peak. They are now fully visible, entirely vulnerable, and being relentlessly chased by an overwhelmingly superior force. This moment sets the stage for the most famous, defining miracle of Prophet Musa's peace be upon him life, where the apparent crushing physical reality is about to be utterly transformed by the power of Allah's uncreated sovereign will. The astonishing swiftness of the Egyptian response confirms the immediate danger warned against in verse 52, and the terrifying depth of Pharaoh's wounded rage. Hadith, the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught, there are two blessings which many people lose, one health and two free time. Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith 6412. This hadith profoundly relates to the context of verses 57-58. Pharaoh and his people were forced to abandon their most abundant blessings, their gardens and springs and excellent dwellings, their health, comfort, and resulting free time. In a fit of vengeful rage, they lost both their material wealth and their security by pursuing a fleeting, ego-driven goal. The hadith reminds the believer to appreciate and utilize these blessings of Allah, health and free time, for righteous purposes, lest they be suddenly taken away due to arrogance and injustice. Let us now supplicate, drawing from the profound lessons of these verses, asking Allah to grant us a deeper understanding and to guide our every step. O Allah, grant us the spiritual wisdom to recognize when the oppressors project their own inner rage and spiritual turmoil onto the righteous. Guard our hearts from the fatal arrogance of worldly power that boasts of being a vigilant group, unaware of your absolute, all-seeing eye. Protect us from the destructive spiritual trap of deep attachment to gardens and springs and earthly treasures, which leads the soul away from your path. Make us worthy, through patience and faith, to be the inheritors of spiritual and worldly goodness, granted through your decree of ultimate justice. Grant us the grace to stand firm when the forces of denial pursue us, knowing that our ultimate security rests in your divine command. Instill in us the certainty that the end of worldly pursuit is ruin, while the end of faith's journey is the gift of your eternal proximity. Sustain us with your boundless provision, and save us from the pride that forfeits the akhirah for fleeting worldly gain. We ask for this spiritual clarity and victory through your magnificent names, ArRahman and ArRaheem. May Allah illuminate your heart and mind with the light of this divine ill. May He make your channel a beacon of guidance for all who seek spiritual clarity and truth. May your efforts be a source of immense reward, and may you be granted the highest stations of paradise. May the peace and blessings of Allah always be upon you and your loved ones. May He grant you unwavering steadfastness on the path of truth, and may your work be a testament to His magnificent names, ArRahman and ArRaheem. Amin.